Welcome to ShrinkChicks.
Welcome to ShrinkChicks.
We're really excited about today's episode because it's very different.
Very different.
So one of the things we believe is that therapy is for everyone, but not every type of therapy and every therapist is for everyone. And we believe that energy healing is another therapeutic modality.
That is so incredibly helpful for
Absolutely.
people.
Especially if you are someone who struggles to verbalize and struggles to bring things up. There hasn't been space in your life to talk. I do think that energy healing and Reiki work can be incredibly helpful.
Our episode today features one of our amazing clinicians,
JoAnne Hanson.
JoAnne Hanson.
Who's a licensed marriage and family therapist and a master Reiki healer.
And I have sent so many clients to JoAnne. And there are things that, might have been difficult for them to bring up in talk therapy that doing energy healing has really brought to the surface for them and has greater supported our work.
Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing. I have so many people that will go in and see JoAnne once a month to work through some of the work we're also working through in talk therapy. So one of the reasons we begged JoAnne to come on today was so that people could understand this and hear from the other side, and just that we believe that making therapy is relatable, we wanted to make energy healing a little bit more relatable.
And I think one of the beautiful things that she does is meld her knowledge of systemic work and being an energy healer, which I think is so unique and so incredible. And so I am just so excited for everyone to hear this episode today.
So without further ado, here is JoAnne Hanson, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a master energy healer. Hyped to have her today. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome to ShrinkChicks.
Welcome to ShrinkChicks. We're so excited. We have one of our incredible therapists here today, JoAnne Hanson, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a energy healer. JoAnne, thank you for being with us.
Okay, so we've been talking about getting you on the show for a while, and we haven't got to see you so much since the pandemic. You're fully remote when you see your clients now, and you also been able to do energy healing remote. So Let's pull it back for a minute. We want to hear all about your journey into energy healing. What the fuck energy healing even is. Tell us everything about it.
Okay, awesome. Well, first I want to say thank you guys so much for allowing me to be here. It's been such an honor to be able to co-create with you guys, and I'm just very, very excited to have this opportunity.
Yeah.
I was thinking coming into this about how I had come across your website many, many years back. Do you guys remember me telling you this?
Yes. Wait, but you sent it to Nicole or something,
I did,
right?
yes.
It wasn't for yourself that you first thought.
No. I had come across your website just in searching online, Googling, just down the rabbit hole. And I was like, these girls are going to do amazing things. You're going to be a force in this field.
That's so nice.
It's
that
true.
was our first website, too.
It wasn't looking good.
I'm telling you, it was an intuition. It really was. It really did stop me in my tracks. And then I had taken the information to Nicole and said, Nicole, you need to work here. I don't know what it is, but I know that you are aligned with their principles and where they're heading, and you have to be here. Then it was about a year later that I had gotten the guidance for myself to reach out as well. So it's really
my God.
so cool
Wild.
to
So
full
I
circle
honestly
moment.
did not remember that.
Okay, wait, I did remember that story. But you just said two really important words, which is intuition and guidance. So I'm thinking that those are things you use in your work.
Absolutely, always. And I think that we are all using them all the time. It's just that we don't recognize it, or we don't slow down enough to tune in, tap in, to understand what those feelings, those pangs, those pings, whatever the term is that you use for yourself, are to you and in your life.
Wow.
And so it's really a long practice of self-discovery and self-awareness to get to the space where it becomes an automatic response for you to sense and know how you're sensing and feeling.
I love that because I think, as therapists too, I just remember early on in our training, they had said to trust your intuition when you're with clients.
I don't remember them telling us that. I remember they saying, have no personality, you suck.
I remember that
was my
too. I remember that too. It was kind of conflicting messages. So
trust yourself, but don't forget to 302. I feel there's some confusing shit.
It was. There was a lot of confusion. It was the most important thing is the relationship you have with your clients, but don't be a real person.
Yeah.
And you're just okay, how the hell am I supposed to build a relationship like that?
Lots of confusion.
Especially for you, JoAnne, because you were an energy healer long before you were a therapist.
Yeah. Yep. that's
I feel like
exactly
people
right.
usually go the other way with that switch.
That is so true, especially nowadays, especially now that energy healing, meditation has become much more mainstream. It's much more frequent and common now that therapists will find themselves pursuing additional training or resources in mindfulness, meditation, learning how to incorporate things like yoga into their practice, somatic therapy, those sorts of things.
So tell us, for the listeners that don't know, tell us what energy healing is.
Yes. So energy healing has a ton of different definitions, descriptions, and I could spend hours and hours talking about all of the different nuances that contribute to what energy healing truly and deeply is. And also there are a lot of different influences that make up one's definition in what that is for them. For me, energy healing at the most simplest form boils down to the ability to work with someone to help identify where there are some stagnant blocks in energy, where there is the inability for the energy to flow freely and naturally the way that we are meant to be, balanced and aligned, and to work through them to help cleanse and clear those blocks or imbalances so that they can get back into a natural state of peace and harmony. When we are in that space of peace and harmony, that's where our healing happens, because we all have natural innate healing abilities within us, and the body heals itself naturally.
Wow.
Always.
Yeah.
The problem is we live in such a fast-paced society that we never slow down enough to relax. And it's through the process of slowing down and relaxing that healing becomes possible.
Do you ever meet anyone and you're like, your energy is so clear, I just have no work to do?
No, because
No.
we live in
No.
No.
But I
That was
think
a
what you're saying is,
rhetorical
like,
question.
in some ways, right? Like, it is such like a product of our like overproductive society that
Yes.
you're just moving and going all the time. Produce, do things, monetize, everything,
Yes.
everything. Buzzwords.
Yeah, absolutely. But think about when you cut your finger. You don't do anything other than cleanse it, put some ointment, put a Band-Aid on it, and then it naturally closes itself because our body knows what to do. And again, it's just that we're overstimulated, we're out of balance, we're carrying trauma, we have old baggage from this life, past life, even beyond, that we come into this incarnation with. And so energy healing creates the possibility and the ability to look inward and identify where those imbalances and blocks are. And if you are at a stage in your journey where you're ready to release them, just because there's a willingness doesn't mean the timing is right,
Gotcha.
which is important.
So tell us, how did you get into energy healing?
Yes.
How did you start out in it?
That is a very long answer. Certainly. So for me, I have come to learn that I was born with sensitivities, increased sensitivities, in comparison perhaps to like the average person, I think that some people now utilize the term highly sensitive person, which I think, Jen, you can relate to and understand for yourself. So there's like an increased activation in the ability to sense and feel what's happening around you. Nowadays, we often also use the term empath, that someone is an empath. They're absorbing the energies around them, either from different people or places or situations. And so those are the things that I now know that I was dealing with since early childhood. I just didn't have the language for them. I can remember things like driving. I wasn't driving. I was sitting in the backseat of the car as 5 or 6 year old and just watching people out the window. And I remember a particular instance in which there was this old person carrying these grocery bags. And I just immediately started crying and felt so much empathy and sadness for them. And I had no idea what was happening. I just knew that I was having a reaction to what I was seeing. Unfortunately, things like that tend to get dismissed and minimized, and then that creates a whole other situation of like confusion, masking your ability, suppressing, repressing, all of which I did for a very, very long time. In sometimes not the most healthy ways, but I think that that's a common path that a lot of people take who are born with increased sensitivities. And so for me, I also always kind of just knew things that other people didn't know, just a sense of knowingness or an awareness that just made sense to me. And it was very weird and confusing to me that the people around me had no idea that, tapping into the same truth that I was tapping into. And that can feel very unsafe a lot of times, especially in situations when you are a child and you are surrounded by adults and you're like, that person doesn't seem like the best person, or why are you laughing at that thing when that's actually not really funny? And like, there's a lot of mixed messages, And so it wasn't really until my first energy healing session, which I happened to receive through my father, who is my own greatest spiritual mentor and teacher, which I could just go on for hours and hours and hours about my dad, who's my best friend. And so I had my first Reiki session with him. I was like, maybe...
Wait, what year is this? Because was Reiki called Reiki then? Like what year are we talking? Okay.
Yeah, of course. So in my teenage years, I was actually drawn to a lot of really cool mystical things like crystals and wanting to understand like how sage works and, all of that fun stuff that I think is kind of common for some teenagers.
Yeah.
My father actually was on his spiritual journey around the time that I was born. So he had already been pursuing his path of inner knowing and awareness and learning tons and tons and tons of energy healing modalities and, was doing Qigong and Tai Chi and all kinds of really cool things, stuff that wasn't of interest to me until a certain stage in my life. And so I was in my very, 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 very early 20s when I had my first Reiki experience with my dad. He had taken the practice of Reiki, especially in a group setting, to a local church in our community. And so it was really cool. It's called a Reiki share, and it's when practitioners will come and they'll offer energy healing to the community. And so I went to the Reiki share reluctantly at first, and I was overly super stressed out at that point in my life. And, my dad's like, just come see what this experience is like. And I remember laying on the massage table and my dad had his hands around my ears and I had these little tiny hoop earrings on and they literally were vibrating and moving. And it just blew my mind. I was like, what is happening right now? And how is this happening? It was so wild to me. In addition, I had really crazy and cool experiences. Like I stayed on the table way longer than I was supposed to because I thought that people were still working on me, even though they weren't.
Whoa.
So I had the experience of feeling people's hands on me when no one was working anymore. Wow. And that's actually a common experience that people will have when they have Reiki or energy healing as well.
Wow.
So that blew my mind completely open. And I was like, I want to know and learn everything that there is to know about what was just happening there. And so my dad was really amazing in creating space for me to cultivate my interest and then took me to tons of different seminars and workshops. And I went to a lot of different trainings and learned to master and teach a lot of different energy healing modalities. And the path just really grew from there. It was in 2005 that he had founded New Beginnings Holistic Therapies, which is a practice that my dad began. And in about 2008, I started to work with my father in the business, and we would hold weekly meditations and energy healing sessions and all of those awesome things. That's kind of how my journey began. Wow. It's a really long-winded roundabout way.
Very good. But I think it's also, it was in your house, right? So your dad was doing it and you still were resistant to it, right?
Yeah.
I think for some people it's like, oh, well, she had this her whole life and stuff. And I think you have a good calling bullshit about this,
yes.
Even then, surrounded by it, you had to do it your own way.
Exactly. I love that you pointed out, and that's exactly true. A lot of huge misconception that specifically my students who I train in Reiki have. They're just like, well, it must have been so amazing to be brought up in an environment that fostered your intuition and growth. Well, no, it wasn't exactly like that. For sure.
Right. Was there, because I know you were speaking about being just a highly intuitive, sensitive child. Were there, times in which that wasn't supported or it was invalidated in some way, even given that you were kind of brought up in that environment?
I can't think of any specific example in which it wasn't supported and validated as much as what comes to mind in this moment is the fear that I carried as a child, looking back on my journey. And I often now I understand that it's often an experience that's common to a lot of people that are born highly sensitive or gifted or able to be a channel for a mediumship or psychic intuition or whatever, fill in the blank for whatever the term is that one is utilizing for their work at that point in time. I was very, very fearful of the dark. I was very, very fearful to go to bed, to go to sleep at night. I often contemplated things about where do you go when you die. I was thinking at 5 years old, talking about what God is and why does the moon follow us home and all kinds of really cool and interesting things.
Stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And also
Yes.
something so much bigger than me, right?
Yes.
Right? This massive, and as a child,
That
is
is
horrifying.
so scary.
Absolutely.
As an adult, that's
Yeah,
terrifying.
I guess that's very true too.
Yeah.
Just horrifying. So that is so incredible, and I think it's so helpful for a lot of people who have questions about energy healing. And so then you became a licensed marriage and family therapist. So tell us about that
At some point,
journey.
you're like, I'll add something on.
I need to
It
put
doesn't sound
something
like
else
enough.
on. Right. So
Exactly.
tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I was already practicing for many years, as Em stated at the start of our time here together today. And I started to recognize that a lot of the clients that I was working with were dealing with a lot of mental health issues in addition to other things that were bothering them at that stage in their life. And so I felt for me that it would be more like of an ethical approach to be more well-rounded and have more science and a foundation and understanding in what was happening mentally and emotionally, cognitively within their system. It really just added to my ability to have a more holistic approach to working with the people that I work with. And so it was interesting because at that time, as you also mentioned, there wasn't really a huge space of integration for bringing spirituality into the therapeutic environment. And so it was something that I really focused on, was super important to me to learn to bridge the gap between psychology and spirituality. Now, and again, nowadays it's much more common, which is really cool and exciting. I'm so happy to see that we are ascending into a space and time where it becomes much more just mainstream and commonplace to talk about some of these things.
Yes.
Yeah, what was that like for you to sit in class though? And for like, there's some classes they don't talk about this at all, right?
Yeah.
Most classes, I would
Yeah,
say.
I would think most classes, right? Like in MFT programs. So what was that part like for you? Because there must be a part of you that's kind of like, but also, excuse me, ma'am,
that's a
sir,
great
hello, what about me?
question.
Yeah.
I kept that part of my life very separate.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you good at compartmentalizing?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. That's a
Yes.
skill at times.
Yes, I've had to learn to compartmentalize throughout my life because of my abilities and gifts and
Yes.
sensitivities. Yeah, and so I definitely just kind of like would shut that part of my awareness and my understanding down while in my training for becoming a therapist. In fact, I had one teacher in particular who I remember had started to poke fun at like aromatherapy at the start of a class, and I thought, oh my gosh, if she thinks aromatherapy is weird, then I cannot tell them that I'm like talking to angels or aliens or like stuff like that. They're gonna be like, excuse me, I think you need to leave right now.
Yeah, that's how you get 302. Right. Well, it's so true, right? Like, is there space for it all to exist together? And why is that such a problem for it to work for some people? Okay, so now you do integrate it,
Yes.
right? When we first met you, we were like, JoAnne's Nicole's, but you didn't tell us. Nicole told on you. She narked on you.
Mm-hmm.
She narked on you.
Didn't she? Nicole was the one who was like, oh, did you know that, like, JoAnne is, like, a medium? Like, do you know that she has this stuff? Like, do you know it's about her? We're like, no.
so funny.
Right? And so then we were like, hey, can we, like, we're actually really into this. Like, we actually, like,
do
think this is
it.
awesome. We don't want you to hide this from us.
Yeah. That brings up a really good point. I had lived my life for a very, 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 very long time in the spiritual closet is the term I like to use.
Yeah.
Despite like doing the work and despite having an amazing client base that spans internationally, you know, I literally still struggle even still sometimes to just put the information out there in a way that I think is easier and more comfortable for other people. And I think for me, that's like some karmic past life stuff that I carry from, you know, being shamed for communicating about my gifts or for, you know, whatever was happening at that point in time.
So even today, you were very nervous to start recording. Do you think maybe that was that about now?
Yes.
Like, this is sort of a public thing to be talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I'm very sorry to expose you, but we need this. This is
Yes.
important.
Yes. Yeah, like
For good reason.
Yeah, like when there is, if there is like shaming that comes up around, like what will people say? What will that be like for you?
The reality is that it's never really happened to me.
In this life.
In this life, exactly. In
Wow.
this lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, most people tend to be very interested and very open and they want to know more.
Yeah.
I, just because of that baggage that I had previously carried and continue to work through continuously, it's an ongoing process for me of learning to heal and unlearn what I carried from those previous lifetimes of feeling silenced or afraid to speak my truth.
Okay, well, I also feel like as soon as I tell someone I'm a therapist, they're like, oh, let me tell you about this weird thing with my...
100%.
And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm not your therapist. So I would imagine if you say that you're an energy healer, people also, like, that's not necessarily safe for you, even on, like, an energy level for you as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's also a boundary thing too, certainly.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah. So trying to really just protect myself too from putting myself in a situation that is overwhelming, dysregulating, uncomfortable. You know, it's important for me to maintain a certain level of energetic boundaries and protection for myself.
So speak to that a little bit. How have you, because we were talking about before we started the podcast that, doing telehealth has actually been really helpful in terms of like maintaining boundaries for your energy. And I think that there, might be a lot of people listening to this who are like, okay, how do I, if they're highly sensitive or they take on a lot from their environment, how have you learned to set those like energetic boundaries for yourself in order to be able to function?
Yeah. So working virtually has created just a huge shift in the ability to have the boundary in space and distance between myself and the client at the physical sense. That doesn't necessarily interfere or disrupt the process of connecting or tuning in energetically, because energy is not bound by space or time, you know? And so this is how things like distance healing are able to be done. However, for me, some of my own personal practices prior to working with a client is to create an energetic shield of protection around myself so that I'm not absorbing things that are just not my own or not good or healthy for me. And then at the end of every session, I disconnect the energy cords that were created between myself and the person that I was working with or the group that I was working with.
Wow.
Okay, so question now. So let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, oh shit, man, I'm into therapy, I'm into energy healing. It'd be very cool to go to someone who does both.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So oftentimes I have been very separate in the way that I had approached this work. As you guys know, early on in working here at this physical location, I was like, well, if they're coming for energy healing, that'll be separate. Right. If they're coming for therapy, that'll be separate. Even though I knew that coming into this, my goal was to work on the integration of these two things. And so that has been a really interesting journey to learn to work through, certainly. So at this stage, I tell my clients that I work with that in the first few sessions, it's going to look very much like traditional talk therapy. It is very important for me to gather information, to understand who you are, because we're trained systemically. I want to know things about your family history. I want to know about your work. I want to know about your home. I want to know all of the things that make up who you are so that I can build a very strong foundation of understanding for our work together moving forward. And then as we move forward, in the process of understanding what your goals are, talking about what the treatment plan is, I will start to learn to understand what is needed for you to bring in and incorporate in each session. Sometimes it's going to look like we're doing mindfulness meditation or breathing techniques. Other time I'm going to go in and do some channeling or connect with your angels and guides. Other times we're going to do emotional clearing of some of the blocks that you have in your chakra centers. It's going to look different every time.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a lot of prep that goes into it, and like communication. Do you have any clients that come in and are like totally freaked out by this?
Totally freaked out. Not necessarily. Well, not clients in this sense. Okay. When people come to my group meditation, they tend to be totally freaked out.
Nobody said anything about angels. Right? We thought this was mindfulness. What the fuck?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, I'm confused now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because when they're coming to me for therapeutic support, they're pretty much coming to me with the understanding that I'm going to offer an integrative, holistic approach. Right. And so they're like, okay, I'm open to whatever it is that you have to offer. I always check in though, because I'm just like, where on the woo continuum are you comfortable?
I love that, the woo continuum.
I love that. Right? Oh my God. There are some people that are like not very far on it.
And on this, and people who are listening to this episode, they're maybe checking in like, how far am I on the woo continuum?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so you'll check in with them and say like, where do you fall on that? And then what will they say? Like, do they become more open to it? Do they like
as soon as you do it, you're like, oh, this is so. I mean, that was my experience the first time I ever did Reiki. That I was like, holy shit. Can I tell this story? I didn't tell the person that at that point I wasn't sure if I had PCOS. I was having fertilities, like, whatever. There's all this stuff happening, and she's like going through everything. She goes to my womb. She goes, it's barnacles on a boat. That's all I can see is barnacles on a boat. And that's like what PCOS can look like with all the cysts. And so that was the first. So as soon as you have one of these, there's no way you can doubt it ever again. You can doubt it when you're like bullshit with your friends until you experience it. Then there's no more denying.
Yeah,
exactly.
Once you see it in your face, the mirror's too there.
I've never done energy healing.
She's really missing out.
I know. I'm so surprised. I remember you said that to me years ago, and
I know.
You're scared to.
I think I'm scared.
What are you scared of?
I don't know. I think it's probably like, I guess it's so such a vulnerable experience.
Yeah.
What's the fear of trying anything once? And that's how I see it.
I have wanted to do it. I guess when we were talking about it, the pandemic then hit.
I know. But we talked about you doing it in the office.
Yeah.
Wait. But it's good to know that. What do I still?
No. I was going to say that like one of the great pieces of advice Nikki, our producer, just said to me was like before I was like I just did ketamine treatment for the first time. Yeah. And before I was like really freaking out, and Nikki was like, yeah, but would you have rather not have done it?
Right.
What if you never tried?
Yeah. No. Totally.
And that's how I feel about like trying all different healing modalities. Is like, yeah, but like what if you didn't try?
And
what if it was like the thing that like really worked for you? So I will try literally everything once, twice, 3 times, usually 5.
Usually 5, and then what? Then what happens after that?
Going with it.
Or like, right, I know. I like that. I think it is so important, because I think traditional therapy can only take you so far sometimes. I really believe that. I think that it's...
Well, especially if it's so blocked in there.
Right.
Right.
And
Like,
so,
there's sometimes we just can't say the words.
And right, whether it's blocked or like whether you need some sort of medication to supplement it, like I just think things that are supplemental for therapy, or like that therapy can be supplemental to other things, and then other things can be supplemental to therapy.
Yep.
And I think that energy healing can be such a good, you could think about it as something supplemental, but the fact that you're doing something so, I think, different in terms of integrating the two, is just I think can open clients up in a completely different way, because there's definitely things when we work with clients that you can tell that there's blocks, and there's only so much you can do as a therapist to get there. And so I think that having like some sort of energy healing integrated can be so incredibly beneficial. Do you see that in the work? Like if you are blocked therapeutically, that you can move it forward through energy healing?
Always. Absolutely.
Wow.
I'm so glad that you brought this up. I want to just go back for 1 second and just let you know that it's not uncommon for people to have some fear or worry or of being too exposed or vulnerable.
Yes.
Having an energy healing session that I have seen many times, and actually it will inhibit the ability to receive and or for the person who is working with you to go deeper in assessing, understanding, receiving information for you about your energy bodies.
That makes sense. So what do you do if someone's like, this is too vulnerable for me, but I want to do it?
Jen won't let them in.
Talk me through that. What does that look like for you?
Just explain exactly that. Well, first and foremost, obviously validate, right? That it is something that it does make someone feel very vulnerable, and create a safe environment, and really focus on the joining and connecting and making that a priority right up front so that they feel comfortable. That's really, really so important, because if you don't feel safe and comfortable, then you're not going to allow yourself to be open to the experience.
Absolutely.
And then talk about what the benefits are and what the person will be able to gain as a result of that outcome and experience. And oftentimes, once they have that understanding, they're more willing to show up and just kind of be open to receive.
Yes. So interesting. I mean, it's like therapy, right? It's just a different kind of vulnerability.
Yeah.
So if you, so tell us a little bit about, so if you see blocks like therapeutically, how do you move them through that? What does that look like?
Yeah. So like you were saying, there are, in my belief as well, there are some limits to what talk therapy can do for a person. Not because there's anything wrong with it or because it's not powerful in its own right, because it absolutely is. It's because there are some things that we carry that are unconscious in our subconscious that we are not aware of. And so working with someone who is an energy healer, who is able to do past life regression therapy or guide you through a meditation that will help you go into those parts of yourself, using tapping, whatever the modality happens to be, to help you get to a space of understanding what the blocks are and how to work through releasing and unlocking the trapped energy of the emotion that's stuck there because of whatever that traumatic experience might have been for you. And in some cases, it is past life energy that someone is carrying. And so how would one get to that space, just through talking at the cognitive cerebral level?
Right. And that makes so much sense. And so are there times in which you will work with, like if someone is in therapy and they just want you to do, they do want energy healing kind of on the side, like do you work with other therapists? What does that look like? If they have a therapist and they're like, I also want to do energy healing, like how does that?
Like you're my client who I've sent to like.
I me too. I've sent so many people to JoAnne. Like what does that look like?
Emilee's, you've been referred to JoAnne.
Yes. Yeah, so it's very common for me to work with people who, just for energy healing, who are also working with their own therapist on the things that have brought them into therapy. And I love that. I love to collaborate with other clinicians. I think it's incredible and it's amazing. It's such a great opportunity.
We need to have one of the, remember right before the pandemic, we were going to have like a meditation.
Yeah.
And then I think it was supposed to be
because
in
Jen would only have to dip her toe in. So if there's other people there, Jen would feel more comfortable.
I need to move slow into it. But do you remember that? We were going to have the whole practice do it.
We had a lot of plans.
We had a lot of
fucking plans, and that it happened, right? Okay. All right. So, JoAnne, as we ask every guest that comes on, call some bullshit in your
Okay.
I
field.
love how you said that.
You like that?
I love it. So I'm definitely super prepared for calling out some bullshit. And
Yep.
I love that you guys do this segment. I think it's so fun. Okay. So one of the most common things that people tend to think or believe coming into receiving their first energy healing session, or when they're students of mine who are learning Reiki, they often wonder, are you going to give me your energy in some way? Or are you going to receive some of my own energy or take something from me? You know, oftentimes it's so good-hearted. They're just like, I'm carrying so much negativity and I just don't want you to take it from me. And that is definitely not the case. Someone who is an energy healer is simply a channel for energy. The energy flows through the person who is the vessel for which energy moves. And it's very similar to the garden hose, right? So the water flows through the garden hose. The energy, for Reiki, for example, the Reiki energy flows through the person. And so you're not absorbing and you're not giving any of your own energy. And oftentimes, though, if you're not practiced or you're new to the practice, sometimes people can fall into trying too much, in which case they will give a little bit of their energy. And so it is so important that they can work on and recognize how important it is to have energetic boundaries, to have an intention, to create a sacred, safe space, to work with your vibrational team, whatever that is for you, you know, and to genuinely and truly be able to connect with the God consciousness.
I love that.
All right, give us another one. You got a few. You had so many.
I have a
we
few.
told you, and she has to do a few.
Yes. Okay, so the other that I think is great and I love is that there is this misconception that spiritual people have to look, talk, walk, be a certain way, that they probably don't curse or they don't eat meat or they don't indulge in alcohol, all of which is really not true at all whatsoever.
Is that personal experience, ma'am?
Yes.
JoAnne can throw an F-bomb if we like.
I definitely do, very often. For sure. And so I was sharing with you guys earlier before starting that at earlier stages of hosting groups at my practice early on, I would show up with like slippers and sweatshirts and sweatpants, you know, hair a mess, no makeup, just the whole thing, and just finishing school at that point in time, working on practice, all of that. And people would show up from the tri-state area for these weekly meditations and they'd look at me like, are you the cleaning lady? Or are you going, like, who's going to be facilitating this event that I heard so many great things about? It cannot be you looking like that. And so it's really hilarious to me that, I mean, I'm sure, keep hitting this thing. I'm sure that there is this idea that if I was wearing like, you know, a kaftan and like, you know, had something like wrapped on the top of my head or something.
And you're stroking a cat. For some reason, you're stroking a cat in this image in my head.
And do you have a crystal ball?
Yeah,
Definitely
ball.
all those things. Definitely headwear, yes.
All the things, yeah. In fact, when I teach my Reiki classes, it's a very long day. And so we go out to lunch and my students are always like waiting to see what I order. And of course I order whatever I want, you know, and oftentimes it happens to be meat on that day.
Yes.
And they're just like, wait, you eat meat? You're allowed to eat meat? Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, do what you think is right for you.
Yes.
Whatever that happens to be for you.
I love that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's
a great one.
Yeah. That one's really funny to me. And then also cursing, drinking alcohol, you know, we're still human. We have to have a human experience no matter where we're at on our journey. We're sent here to have the humanness, to be human.
Absolutely. I love that.
Energy healers are happy all the time. That's another one. That is total bullshit. Like, totally not. Of course, we are human beings just like everyone else. And we have moods and we have things that are heavy in our life. We're managing and balancing a lot of different things. You know, I mean, I think this leans into that and creates more in that narrative of toxic positivity. You know, oh, you must be happy all the time and, you know, put on a brave face.
Right.
No. That's definitely not the case here. And or that people who do energy healing are just very soft or they're pushovers. You know, they don't stand up for themselves. Also not true. I am definitely going to stand up for myself. I'm definitely going to protect myself and, you know, that and set boundaries and make sure that I speak my truth because that's important to having a healthy life and healthy relationships.
Wow. That
Mm-hmm.
is incredible.
Yeah.
I think so helpful, truly, because I think it does, you know, like bust some of those myths.
Yes. So if you enjoyed today's episode, which you'd be wild not to, JoAnne is amazing. Please send this episode to someone who might enjoy it. Maybe someone who needs an appointment or a session with JoAnne. JoAnne, where could people find you?
Yes, people can find me at JoAnne at WC ShrinkTherapygroup.com. I have one of the old emails because I've been here
do,
for quite a
you
long
do.
time.
She's an OG.
She's an OG.
Yes, an OG.
You
I
are.
love it. It's so true. Or they can come to your website and fill out an online inquiry, and you guys will send that over to me.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. And she also runs groups with her own stuff. If you are looking to contact her in any way, we are happy to make that connection. Hey, for today's episode, we always love a review, a 5-star rating. Unless you didn't like it, then you should just go hang out with some angels. And don't forget, we love you. And to know yourself, to grow yourself, you got to know yourself. We'll get it right one day. We'll see you next week, folks.